All right, everybody. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on this very important occasion. And again, for any folks that are trickling in, we ask that, and if you know that they're trickling in, we ask that you come in quietly so that the speakers are not disturbed in any way. So firstly, thank you so much for joining us here at the National Press Club. My name is Se Hoon Kim, the senior correspondent and the assignment editor. The senior correspondent, of course, for the East and South Asian Affairs for the Global StratView. I'm also very honored to have our editor, Poonam Sharma, join us today here. This event, the U.S.-India strategic partnership itself can't come at a better time. We do this, of course, a week before the visit of the Indian Republic's Prime Minister, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit here to Washington, D.C. And of course, because of such occasion, many questions arise when it comes to defense, trade, and of course, the politics that are involved within the region and beyond. So today we are very honored to be joined with two very distinguished panelists. Let me just introduce our first panelist, Colonel John Mills, retired with the U.S. Army. He was a former director in the Cybersecurity Policy, Strategy, and International Affairs at the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And we're also very honored to be joined by our second panelist, Mr. Christopher Roper Schell, who is currently the contributing editor at the Fair Observer, and he was a former congressional liaison for the Pentagon. And so today we are looking forward to a very good, lively discussions. And for all those that are joining us live, thank you so much for joining us, and we welcome any questions. So for the members in the audience, whether you're sending it in person or virtually, if you have a question, please send it or write it on a notepad, and one of our staff will be collecting it and giving it over to me. So we will get on with the discussion. All right. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here at the National Press Club. It's truly an honor. Now, for both of you, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to have what we here at the Global StratView call a say, right? What you deem to be the most important aspect of the U.S.-India strategic relations. There it is. Uh-oh. Oh, no worries. All right, it happens.
That's it. That's where I thought it was supposed to be. So
Oh, yeah. Well,
sorry.
well, it is off to a good start then. Yeah. Well, let's start with you, Colonel Mills. So, in your opinion, right now, if you were to name a few things that were the most important aspect of the U.S.-India relations, or as we call it here, the strategic partnership, what are some of your views? What would it be, in a sense, and what do you think could be the biggest factor of them all? Yeah.
Well, in the panorama of world events, what's going on right now is we have a developing and brewing showdown between China and their view of America as a hegemonic state. China and the Chinese Communist Party clearly want to establish themselves as the center of the universe, and I mean that both literally and figuratively. And everybody else is a tributary, everybody. So I think we have to take this very seriously. Now, there's some who would say, don't overreact, everything's okay, don't worry about it. Well, I think the more we prepare to deter and prevent conflict, the less likely there will be conflict. And so that's why I think critical strategic relationships like America and India, America and the Quad, with India, Japan, Australia, and the U.S. are very important, because also with what's going on, there is a great game in reverse as everybody remembers so fondly, in the 1800s, the British and the Russians going at it in and around India. That's going on right now. And now, with the establishment of this essentially a de facto treaty with Russia and the No Limits Partnership, but also with, shockingly and disappointingly, Saudi Arabia and Iran, there's clearly an attempt by China to encircle India. That's what's going on right now, to encircle and constrain India. I don't think our current administration has, admittedly not put its best foot forward in advancing the India-America dialogue. I hope that gets better, improves. I left office in 2018, and India was absolutely one of my highest priority, and I was responsible for the cyber relationships and partnerships, and India was in the very top tier of developing those relationships. I think there's a natural relationship between America and India, very strong and growing Indian heritage community in America, very strong in the IT sector, cyber sector, very strong in the cyber sector. So there's just a very natural relationship, and we need to develop and nurture that, and to a very high level. And we need to do that because the more we do this, now China and their interests would counter, well, we're just trying to encircle China. And I don't think that's the case, and I don't agree with it. There's not a moral equivalency to what's going on. There is a malign intent by China. That's what's going on. It's malign. There's no other way to explain it. And during the Trump administration, between President Trump and Dr. Navarro, just two people individually were able to very deftly and successfully demonstrate all instruments of national power, not just the military instrument of national power. The current administration it needs to do a better job of the non-M or military, because it's all about diplomatic, information, economic, and President Trump and Dr. Navarro showed the power of America using those non-M or non-military instruments, national power. And there's a natural, we have a natural interests with each of these, with America and India, and hopefully we're going to do a lot better on that, because to counter what China is up to right now.
Thank you so much, Colonel. Dr. Schell, I have the same question goes for you. In your opinion, I know you've focused a lot on the business sector as well as other political and military sectors. So in your opinion, what are some of the most important aspects of the ongoing U.S.-India relations?
So you've asked me about the economic aspects of this, and I think India will be a place where we can sell U.S. products and services. I think it's where the U.S. will invest. I think it's where manufacturing will take place. Manufacturing, of course, has been in the news of late. The GE engines for the Tejas fighter. We've seen that Apple wants to make up to 25% of their high-end cell phones. And so a lot of these deals are occurring. I think the economics are apparent. Right? We talk about the demography of India. It's young, it's large. We talk about India as the world's largest democracy. Sometimes I find that people will just toss out, India is the world's largest democracy, and it seems to me sometimes people are a little bit lazy. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's vibrant. It means that though despite what you read in the New York Times a lot, they actually vote. They seem to, I was over there last fall, I taught for a bit, and as I tease other Indian friends of mine, I said, it seems like you guys like to vote like every Tuesday or something. So I think as a place where we, the US, can sell things, it's doing very well. We are India's largest trading partner. But I also am curious about when India starts producing a lot of things that would be bought by the US. This ties in with the friendshoring concept. So to get to your point, Colonel, China has, in my opinion, I would agree with you, shown itself to be duplicitous, to be cantankerous, shall we say nicely, cutting off our ships in various international waters. They go and raid offices, and it's tough to do business. And we're looking for friendly places to produce products and to sell them. And I suppose I'll do a little bit of foreshadowing into a point I'll probably make later on. A lot of people talk about the transportation infrastructure in India as not yet being up to snuff. Well, when I was there, I can tell you, it is absolutely wild. The infrastructure being built, and yes, sometimes you'll be on a 6-lane highway and then all of a sudden you're on a gravel road, but it is moving very, very quickly. And the Interior Minister is going to connect, I think it's like 500 different cities, and they're just building all kinds of things. And so that infrastructure will be there, which means manufacturing can move there more readily. They are an ally. We have a common foe in China. They actually have a sort of frozen conflict or quasi-kinetic conflict on their border. So they're none too fond of what's going on there. But I see the economy taking a number of different forms. And I don't want to be too long-winded, which I probably already have been.
No worries, please
So
go
I want to
ahead.
let you get to your other questions.
All right, awesome. Well, both of you actually mentioned something very interesting, is that you both identified China as the common foe, mostly also because of their malign interests throughout for the U.S. and I would guess for throughout the world. The question that comes into mind regarding that then is, both of you may be aware of when it comes to India, China's claim over the northern Indian border. What do you think the U.S. should do? What do you think is the most appropriate reaction of the U.S. or to counter that? And what can we do, in a sense? What can the U.S. do in a sense to address that appropriately in order to strengthen this U.S.-India ties, Colonel?
Well, I think we should be clear and simply put, we should side with India. It's as simple as that. And the challenges with one school of thought in foreign affairs is to be sophisticated to the point that nobody understands what we're saying. And I've been through so many international bilat, multilat meetings, both in uniforms in the special operations community and actual operations as a senior civilian at the Pentagon. There's a school of thought and behavior in the U.S. State Department, Office Secretary of Defense or Policy, of being so sophisticated even the speaker doesn't even know what they're talking about. And so many times our critical strategic partner will ask me after the meeting, what in the bloody world were they saying? And I don't think, we've got to cut that silliness out. Be clear and direct. It's very simple. Side with India. It's as simple as that. Who's the aggressor? It's China. Let's not make this overly complicated. So I just, those who are in office, I don't mean to question them and question their performance, but stop being over-sophisticated, be clear. What these strategic partners appreciate always is clarity and authenticity. Clarity and authenticity. They do not appreciate this, excuse me for naming an institution, this Harvard Center sophistication that will just put you to sleep and nobody afterwards will understand what was said anyway. So be clear, be concrete, be actionable. If we're going to say something, be actionable. If we're going to, don't lecture down to the other country. Give a clear, actionable branch and sequel that both countries can work on. And I think it's important that that's what America does, and especially with that northern border. I mean, let's not make this overly complicated. Side with India. It's as simple as that.
Right. So I guess this next question would also reflect upon what you have said, Dr. Schell. What would your view be on this in terms of the northern border issue?
I would say I'm going to strive for a very un-Harvard-like clarity. I've, I don't know how to make it a very good compliment, but I suppose, given your parameters, no one could mistake you for a Harvard man. You were very concise. So I was asked to talk about the economy, but nonetheless, I think, yes, I agree with you, side implicitly with India. I don't think that we can get terribly involved. I know President Biden has at sometimes muddied the waters with regard to Taiwan, what our level of commitment is there. But we have this defense industrial cooperation roadmap, right? We are going to start building engines for jet fighters. We are weaning India off of a certain reliance on the Russians. A common misconception I run into all the time is that India was non-aligned during the Cold War years. And I have to tell my friends that it was only sort of explicitly, non-aligned. You'll read this all the time in history books. They were non-aligned, and it's like, no, not really. So we're weaning them off of Russian kit, which I must say, in the context of Ukraine, they have to be thinking, thank God. So I think we support them. I think they recognize that we have a common military foil, and maybe foe. I think we have the ISET, where there's a lot of discussion going on. I think the Quad is the one I run into all the time, where people are talking about exchanges of technology. I think we do implicitly support them. And I think in the future, and if I may broaden the theme ever so slightly, the U.S., given its financial constraints, its in real dollars declining military budgets, we do want to support India's military, its growth, that alliance, because quite frankly, and it's not popular to say so, I don't see how the U.S. keeps being Team America world police with our budgets. And we're just going to have alliances, and I think India can provide a great deal of that support. They've always had a wonderful naval strength, and I wish them well, and I would be on their side in this one.
All right. Well, Dr. Schell, the next question, moving on from that, would be touching upon the economy, and Colonel Mills will get to you about that as well. For example, South Korea has invested more than $50 billion in the Indian economy, I believe, last year alone. I'm sure Japan is following the same suit, and so are other countries. Given the state of the relations that we're in right now with India, as per the United States, what do you think are some of the specific sectors as to which the U.S. can get involved with India that will result into a mutual economic benefit for both countries? Some have said, IT. Some have said the digitization of the economy. But we're curious to know what your views are on this. Yeah. Dr. Schell first.
Oh, me. All right. I think it runs the gamut. And a friend of mine sent me a good question, and it was so good I had to write it down, because I would never have thought of anything so brilliant. And he said, how do we partner to combine American technology and brands with Indian technology and labor to provide important capabilities and products in markets where the U.S. doesn't compete well? And a lot of that's because of the cost of labor. I think there are a variety of places where we can partner. And frankly, I think private industry is already figuring this out. I alluded to Apple making iPhones. But more technical matters, like the GE deal, which we expect to be formalized this week with Prime Minister Modi's visit, could lead to exciting and interesting avenues. And I know when I talk to my Indian friends, they're quite keen on this idea of technology and sharing of information and knowledge. And I think that will be, the GE deal is a good trust-building measure. They just bought a boatload of Boeings, 220. I mean, or maybe it was more, I don't know. But it was a lot. I think outside of, people get bogged down in these 2+2 dialogues and the ISET, and ISET's great, and the Quad. Those are sort of nice things, nice talking points. But private business is already figuring out that India is the next place. And I don't want to bore you with GDP numbers. I don't want to bore you with transportation and infrastructure expenditures. But go over there, you will see it. And I don't think there's, I don't want to emulate what the Russians are doing with their no boundaries, whatever, with China, but I don't think there are any boundaries. I think we can cooperate in any number of areas. And I just think I'm kind of stoked.
Yeah.
Colonel?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a spectrum of good responses and topics in this area here. First and foremost, we greatly appreciate India and their acquisition of a number of key American platforms, both in the military sector and also the private sector. Boeing, admittedly, I'm a Boeing guy. I was born in Seattle. My dad worked on the 737 production line, 747. So we are very grateful and thankful for their acquisition of all the Boeing aircraft and also the 737, which was not too far away from where I grew up. My dad worked down there. So it's a great platform anyway. Enough about pushing sales talk here. But all of these are very important, and getting them off the Russian kit is a very good one. And I think the Indians have been extremely gracious and diplomatic, but at the same time dissatisfied with the nature of the Russian kit. And there has to be a long-term transition plan. They got it because it was affordable, and at the time there was a strategy for acquiring that equipment. Now, having gone head-to-head with the Soviet armor in the first Gulf War, and the Iraqis had some of the best ones, they didn't fare up too well. They burned very well, they blew up very well, but they didn't fare very well. And they're very poorly made and shoddy, and a lot of this equipment. So would encourage a continued transition. And I think the Indians would have a lot, like the Ukrainians, a lot of innovation that they can add to this and make it even better. And I'm talking about the American kit. And so we should continue to develop that relationship. And I'd like to posit an idea here is India has become a very strong, diversified economy that makes things. And a nation isn't a nation unless they make things. And they make things that make things. The British in their managed decline after the Second World War just decided to kind of remove themselves from the international order and just retire to their land holdings and oversee their land holdings and just kind of watch everybody else do things. That's a strategy. I don't think that's a good, viable, long-term strategy. I have never believed in managed decline. I don't think it's a good idea. I think America actually is in the early stages of that. And I think India could help re-industrialize America in many ways and help us relearn our lost arts of making things and making things that make things. That's a very deep comment when I say it's not just making something, it's making the machine tools that make things. If you aren't making machine tools, you're already drifting toward a coffee shop economy where everybody runs a coffee shop on a corner. That's not an economy, okay? So you gotta make things that make things. Right? That's a deep comment. And so I think India, Japan was in the 70s in many ways taught America how to be more efficient, how to be more the AMC Gremlin of the 1970s was not a good car. The Japanese were making far better cars. Was it? No contest. The Japanese were making better cars. And they taught us the lost art of making a good quality car. I think India has a lot to offer in helping America relearn industrialization. That's a good word, not a dirty word, because not everybody can graduate, go to college, and then write environmental impact statements in a corner office making $100,000 plus a year. It just, that's not an economy. You know, not everybody can work at a nonprofit lecturing everybody else about other topics. That's not an economy. You got to make things and make things that make things. And I think India has a lot to offer America in that.
may I just kick back on a statement you made? You were talking about weaning India off the Russian kit. So at the beginning of more or less the Russia-Ukraine war, 72% of India's kit was Russian. They are rapidly transitioning away from this, and I think this is an understated point. So when we went to the UN and India abstained from certain votes, a lot of folks in the US were furious. And I told a lot of my friends, look, they vote no, their military turns into a pumpkin in very short order because they will not have parts. This is not India saying go fly a kite, US. This is India saying we cannot denude ourselves of our defense capability at this point. Then there's the other energy issue, which we've not gotten into, and that's fine. Then you look at agreements like the AKs, the modern AKs, and the deal that was struck about a year and a half ago. And they decided to make those in UP, where they desperately need the jobs. And it's a good weapon. So they are going to continue to have a fruitful relationship to some degree with Russia. But there is a rare opportunity right now to bring India, not into the fold, but align with them. I'm not trying to suggest that we've somehow cajoled them or rooked them into a relationship, but they're looking for friends, and frankly, as are we. So I think people have to take the long game and recognize that they won't always 100% be with us, that there will be Russian kit in their arsenal, but they're looking for other stuff. And as you mentioned, and I did earlier too, better stuff. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That was terrific, and I'm sure our audience extremely appreciates that point as well. Which leads us to the next point. Let's get a little more specific here, gentlemen. In both of your opinions, is that do we have, in a sense, patents are a very important aspect of all of this. So do we have a common interest between the U.S. and India, of course, to protect the inventions, patents in India, specifically? As you know, a lot of our intellectual properties were generously stolen by our friends, the Chinese Communist Party, throughout the years. Of course, some may say that it was this whole liberal economy will somehow change China. Somehow it seems like it has resulted in them taking a lot of our stuff out. Mm-hmm. It's to a point where China appears to have generated a philosophy of rules that are made to be broken if you can get away with it. And so in terms of the patents and protecting intellectual property, does the U.S. in a sense have an interest to help India to achieve that? The protection of their patents, intellectual property, and so much.
Yeah, well, so I was in a recent film called Innovation Race, available at innovationrace.com. Not that I'm promoting the film, it's a great film, but it's about we've lost our way. The American patent system is so important, the Founding Fathers put it in the Constitution. Many, because of the nature of this public school system, don't learn critical, important things like that. We put it in the Constitution. And we've lost our way, though, a bit. The 2011 America Innovates Innovation Act, America Innovates Act, which was running parallel to a key piece of cyber legislation I was working on at the time. This is the danger of what happens in the modern America monstrosity of our bureaucracy of government, the swamp, is we get unintended consequences and the opposite of what we think we're doing. The 2011 Act actually devastated the American intellectual property and patent system. We need to address that. The Chinese, and who was behind that? It was the marriage of the administration at the time with big tech, who said, let's write something that sticks it to those small cyber innovators that dare rise up against the gathering giants of Google, Apple, things like that. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything went wrong. And here we destroyed our patent system. Now, so we got to get back. Now, what did the Chinese do? They copied and now created their patent system, which was based on our original system. Now, it's funny because I have several either already granted or in progress copyrights, trademarks, and patents. And I'm running a couple right now, and it was interesting. As soon as you post it, see, this is one of the processes. When you submit, it's publicly posted. Well, of course, you get hit with patent lawyers that offer to run the process for you for a large sum of money, which most people could probably run themselves anyway. But it was interesting. A number of times I've been solicited by Chinese legal firms, I guess, that said, why don't you simultaneously run your patent through our system? And I go, wow, that's a very interesting idea, but I'm not going to do that. Thank you. Okay, this is, but see, this is just like the great game that's going on geographically. This is the great game intellectual property-wise and economically. What did we do? We shot ourselves in the foot, passed bad legislation that was gravely injurious to our existing patent system. Why? Because over-sophisticated people who don't know what they're talking about didn't think this through. This happens all the time with legislation. You gotta think through the effects. And we gotta address this horrible piece of legislation and get it right. Go back to what we were doing. Of course, there were some tweaks, but we gotta go back because we've created a mess, and American patents have gone like this. Chinese patents have gone like this. Okay, this is not that complicated, but our over-sophisticated people who know better than everybody else have once again taken something and trashed it and crashed it. We got to address this. This is bad. This is really bad. The Chinese are doing what we were doing.
To be honest, your answer was so scintillating. I've sort of forgotten the question, but I think it was about independence, manufacturing, and India.
Does the U.S. in a sense have an interest to help protect patents in India?
Indeed, yes. I talk to a lot of folks about the Quad, and they say, oh, when are you going to give us technology? And I'm like, well, we're not just going to give you the technology. And they say, well, how do we grow? And how do we grow like China did? And I'm like, well, they just stole it, and we'd rather you not do that. So then what you end up doing is you have a conversation about how they can develop and then ultimately contribute to things. For example, they would very much, when you talk to their defense folks, have something that they could add to a sort of JSF F-35 deal when we next design something. And I think that's fantastic, to where they could be a contributing partner and a beneficiary of all of this. So in terms of just giving them technology, that's probably not going to happen. But as I understand it, this GE deal includes some mutually beneficial technological aspects. India very much wants to not only make the things that make things, but also just make things. And who wouldn't? If you go back to their Swadeshi movement, then they have a very much idea of indigenously producing things gives you not only economic opportunity, and they think about that, but independence. And we talk a lot about the way India and the U.S. view things. I think that sort of mindset is something I respect and admire. We do want to defend our IP. I, thus far, have not seen really any evidence. I'm sure somebody somewhere stolen something that they're looking to rip us off and reverse engineer like the Chinese do. But I don't think culturally that is the way they think about things. Who do we rip off and who do we frankly screw to get the next bit of kit that we can then build as our own? So I think we should defend our patents, as I always do. But I think India as a reliable partner, that's coming along. And I think India is a place where we can, at least at the beginning, just make things, is occurring right now. I mean, the word's out. Businesses are doing this already. But I'm not sure. Do you mean defend our patents? Do you mean?
No, basically, does the U.S. have any interest in helping India to protect their patents? And because in a sense, we are technologically becoming more aligned with the country, and so in a sense, with this increasing economic cooperation, many of our viewers are wondering, do we have any, in a broader sense, do we have any incentive to help protect each other's patent systems and intellectual property?
Sure. I mean, you have to have mutual respect for the rule of law and for patent protection. So to me, it's a natural yes. I mean, I'm all for protecting theirs if they protect ours.
Thank you. Well, let's go back a little bit to the security matter, which I guess also undeniably is connected to our economic relations with India. China and Pakistan are definitely huge players here. And I say Pakistan because, in a sense, if you think about India, the natural enemy country or a malign country to the Indian people is specifically the government that has been running Pakistan for many, many years. Is the growing U.S.-India partnership, in your opinion, unnerving China and Pakistan? And will these two nations try to derail the partnership by various means? And if they do, and again, this also comes when countries are designating countries like Pakistan as an unreliable nation to invest in, for example. A lot of companies are moving out of China right now. We know that some major corporations, which we will not mention here, have been moving their major operations from China all the way to India. And so, do you think there will be some type of a derailment from these two malign entities? And what should be the U.S.'s reaction towards that?
Okay, has a lot of. Let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, I'm going to say something that maybe seemed controversial, but I think America can be an ally and a strategic partner to India and Pakistan at the same time. Obviously, there's differences. They're both nuclear-armed powers. I remember shortly after 9/11 when extremist elements were attempting to take control of the Pakistani nuclear forces, and that was one of our rush urgent missions to make sure they didn't take control of the Pakistani nuclear weapons. We were successful at the time, but just wrapping it up on Pakistan. Pakistan has become essentially a tributary state. It's an unstable tributary state of China. I don't think they like that. But they work themselves into a corner, and now they're trying to figure out how to get out of it. They are really effectively under control of China right now. A lot of instability issues in the population. But quick story: years ago, I worked in a U.S. government agency, and my colleague was an American citizen who had been a Pakistani Air Force officer and spoke with a distinct British accent. Went to Sandhurst, I believe it was. And I asked him, so what is it? And this was all before 9/11. And I said, just explain to me what's going on. I don't understand the American-Pakistani relationship. I just don't get it on several accounts. And he goes, well, it really started when we were doing the U-2 flights in the late 50s. And we needed Pakistan at that time to do the U-2 flights from there to Norway, and creativity, and we appreciated that. But the Pakistanis learned a hard lesson, because when we shut down that program, boom, the cash cow left. No pun intended. Okay, they learned. Okay, right. So and I fault the American behavior in our national security environment. We want to create. I'm a firm believer in the special operations community. Tenet number one is not to kill people. Tenet number one is to build reliable, long-term friendships, because you never know when you're going to need a friend. That's special operations rule number one. Creating friendships, okay? I don't like this, and there's a history of it, and I'm just being transparent on the American side of national security relationships of country X, we need to do this, we're going to pay you a lot of money, and we do it and we're gone. That's kind of sending the wrong message, because the Pakistanis learned over time, well, what was going on when the Russians were Afghanistan? We returned, and we needed Pakistan again, and a lot of money was flowing. And then, essentially, we chewed up the Russians in Afghanistan. And then, boom, we left, and the money turned off again. That is a very, we're not communicating an effective long-term relationship. So a lot of that was on Pakistan, but with India, I think we need to develop that good security relationship that is consistent, where the Indians can count on us and trust us. And I think that's what's important, and especially with the Quad. I mean, and as India, I don't mean to be over dramatic, is being surrounded by China. That is a calculated strategy of China. We work together. The defense of Taiwan is important, and China wants to beat us without fighting. However, the more we militarily prepare, the less likely there will be conflict. In Taiwan, the left shoulder of Taiwan, the country of Taiwan is facing that other country to the left. It's the left shoulder, the Philippines. That's where India can come in and be of assistance in the Quad, just with their presence. Because we got, with Japan and even South Korea, we got the north. So we got the right shoulder. If them and Australia secure the left shoulder, that'll be visible and demonstrative deterrence for China. Don't even think about it.
Thank you. Sure.
Sure, I'll grab that one. China and Pakistan, will they derail
Is there a
attempts
chance?
at, U.S.-India relationship? Can they? I mean, I think this is on a natural course. The China plus one manufacturing policy we see now implicitly requires another partner outside of China. China is seen as less reliable. Supply chain bottlenecks I mentioned earlier, raiding offices of due diligence firms and others, shutting down IPOs. Will they try? Maybe. I just don't see how they can. You were talking about the cash cows of Afghanistan. Indeed, when we went into Afghanistan, the cash cow was once again back in force, and W and Musharraf were good buddies, right? And we doled out a load of cash because we were trying to keep eye on the Waziristan region and all the baddies going back and forth. And then under Trump, he said not one nickel more, right? I mean, not a penny. Then I'm in India last fall, and all of a sudden there was $450 million in F-16 upgrades, and God, you would have thought the world had fallen apart. I think we will have to understand the sensitivity of that issue to India. But I think that Pakistan is a little bit of a basket case. They do have a good intelligence service. Frankly, from what I hear, better than India's. But I just don't think that they can substantially interfere with a somewhat inevitable course of these growing ties. So, and I think China's going to throw a fit, and they'll continue to steal everything that's not nailed down and most of what is. So,
Well, then follow-up question to that, from what you said, for you, Mr. Schell, is that the Morgan Stanley's, I guess, or Morgan Stanley statistics recently showed that India will, in a sense, by 2027, will become either the third or possibly even the second largest economy in the world. And so if you can maybe touch upon how that may even impact the future U.S.-India relations. Because in a sense, because China was such a huge economic superpower over the last, I guess, last 3 decades or even 2 decades, that made the U.S.-China relations sort of the central focus of the world. Do you think, in your opinion, and we'll go over to this as well, not Colonel Mills, is that, do you think, in your opinion, that may become a reality in the future, or is it going to be a different form than what we know at this point?
I think it's a fascinating question. One, we have less of a problem with getting rich before it gets old, right? That was the Chinese issue. And that sort of seems to be where this train is going. We also don't have to think in terms of the historic trade-off that we thought the Chinese were making. You know, we get a little bit more money every year and we agreed to this autocratic government. And despite what a lot of places will write about PM Modi, it's not autocratic. It is frankly too chaotic to be autocratic. So I think, you know, I think that growth and the markers they want to hit, and they talk about wanting to hit so much in GDP. I think the knock-on effects are impossible to predict, mostly good. And as I alluded to earlier, and I'm sure you have far more fascinating insight into this, I see them as a major defense partner in the future because we cannot afford to do what we are doing, running the deficits we are running. So India will have an increasing stake in keeping the global economy going. I think they're going to grow gangbusters. They will have relative stability in the coming years because I think Modi will continue to win. Looks like the BJP is doing pretty well. Like him or hate him, that's stability. And I think that India is set for a course of very consistent, very dynamic, almost explosive, I dare say explosive growth that will be a net benefit to our relationship, the world, and I don't want to get all teary-eyed over democracy, but democracy too.
Yeah, one of the topics that I think is very related to this is the dollar as the reserve currency, because that's one of the other great games that's going on. The current administration in America is very, I talked about being over-sophisticated. You do have to be a little bit sophisticated on these topics and understand. They don't understand what's going on. China is really trying to replace the dollar, the almighty dollar, as the reserve currency. That's the key great game that's going on right now, which is related to deficit spending. In the past, we just deficit spent because in the worldview, everybody said, America is the best model for the future. They're good for the money. It's as simple as that. There is no formal vote on what the reserve currency is. But the current administration has gotten very good at driving many countries that had been close to America away from it. They have excelled at that. And Blinken is just racking up the frequent flyer miles, flying to a country after they've left the American sphere. I think he needs to do that before they leave. I don't know if he missed that at the Belfer Center or Harvard. You want to fly to them before they leave the American sphere. You want to keep them in the American sphere. And I think that's the key thing is I don't believe India wants to use the yuan as the reserve currency. I am pretty sure of that. But we got to get better in America. And so the days of just, you know, throwing money at the problem and continuing to increase our annual deficit and the accumulated deficit, and that's a bipartisan issue. All sides are guilty on that. We got to figure that out. But the key fundamental issue is who's going to be the reserve currency, and I don't think the Biden administration. They're just not sophisticated enough. You got to be too sophisticated or under-sophisticated. This is where they come across. They just don't understand the concept and what generates and formulates that as the reserve currency. Who gets to be the reserve currency?
So the history behind the petrodollar, right, which helped engender the dollar as the reserve currency is fascinating. We won't get into that because I don't want everyone to fall asleep. but nonetheless, it's important. And if we go back into this, I think one of the recent developments is the over-reliance on sanctions, frankly, by members of Congress and others, who just lazily, every time something bad happens, they say sanctions, 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 right? Because they really don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And they probably aren't steeped enough in the policy to have a clue. But what is going on right now? Okay, Russian banks are all linked to every bank in Iran. So we've got the petro ruble. We have the petro yuan. because now where's Russia selling its oil? And I got to say, India's buying, and I get that. Not a good look, but I get that. Bless you. And so we're going to have to move on to something else, because the dollar for the foreseeable future, given its size and liquidity, is going to be the reserve currency. Whether or not it stays is up for debate, but we are not going to have the sort of swift banking stranglehold on other sources of other means of exchange. And this is something where I think members of Congress need to start thinking about, well, what do we do that's meaningful, where we don't just get up on Fox News or MSNBC and say, we're going to sanction them, and have no clue what they're talking about when they do it.
Well,
I could add on
go ahead,
just a little bit. Really, if you break down what gives a country the power to sanction, ultimately, America's ability to sanction was based upon the reserve currency, because then you can turn around to a bank or financial system and say, sanction them. And they'll say, got it, done. Right. When you're not the reserve currency, you say, sanction them, and they'll say, yeah, we're not going to do that. So this knee-jerk reaction and tendency of Congress, they're not thinking forward, they're looking in the rearview mirror, is we're losing our ability to sanction. And again, this is a key issue here. Sanctions are a tool, one of many tools in the toolbox of all instruments of national power. And it's just like, we don't want the military instrument, to be the knee-jerk reaction. We don't not want sanctions to be the other knee-jerk reaction. We got to, again, not too sophisticated, but you got to be a little bit sophisticated and understand these tools. There are more tools.
God bless them. Don't you wish there were a little more sophistication in Congress? You know,
I briefed too many Congress members who I realized after a few seconds, even though they had asked for the brief, had no idea what the topic was. And I'm looking into the eyes of somebody who literally does not understand the topic they asked to be briefed on.
Yes.
It's like, and you figure out how do you gracefully bring the briefing to a closure and leave.
Right. Well, that leads us to our last question, is that yesterday the State Department announced that Secretary Blinken's visit to China. And this comes suddenly, right before Prime Minister Modi's state visit. In your view, is there any indication that there's some type of a sophisticated, and after hearing you, maybe that's not the right vocabulary.
There's that sweet spot.
Right.
You got to hit that sweet spot.
What do you think the driving reason behind that is at this point?
I'm not sure Secretary Blinken knows. I see very little evidence of thought. He comes from the school, besides the fact he came, I will bring up something domestically political, but I think it is relevant. He came from the UPenn Biden Center, where we can't even find the IRS Form 990. There is, which all nonprofits need to have. I've searched the databases personally. There is no IRS. So this thing called the UPenn Biden Center that appeared to receive a large amount of Chinese funding, even though it doesn't have his IRS paperwork correct, and he used that as the place where he fabricated the 51 intel officer letter, which I worked with 11 of those 51. That's partisanship at a nonprofit, the UPenn Biden Center. So that's all relevant and important. So I think, unfortunately, we have senior leaders who, frankly, don't know what they're doing and are kind of just flailing from crisis to crisis and believe that lecturing down to countries in the abstract over things that are tangential at best, offensive at worst to those cultures, but we want you to do this because this is what's right. Stop lecturing down to these countries on societal issues that are, like I said, at best tangential, at worst offensive. So God bless and good luck to Secretary Blinken as he goes to China for whatever reason he's going to China for. But I would say the breathless report of a Chinese spy base in Cuba was most likely plants grow in many places, not just gardens, and that was a planted news story with somebody speaking on background. I've spoken on background. It's a routine in the swamp. You get handed your talking points, you talk on background to a group of reporters, and they all rush out like it was some secret meeting. That was a planted news story, and I think it was related to, one, go after Trump, two, I guess stick it to China. Right. So I would really like to know what the strategy is behind Blinken, but I don't think he knows.
So it was interesting, the rollout of that Cuba story, right? Because there's this big release, and there's a lot of discussion. They're going to have, at the price of whatever it was, $2 billion. Then all of a sudden, 2 days later, it's like, oh, by the way, already have since 2019. Yeah. I mean, it struck me as, I can't say coordinated, because God knows that's always giving somebody too much credit, but it seemed to me very orchestrated in a general way. What is Blinken doing in China? I don't know either. But he's going to go over there, and he's been told to go make nice. I almost feel like, and I don't want to be too critical, and I understand it is important that we probably should try to come to some understanding. You know, the red phone with the Soviets, and we have one with the Chinese. They read that a whole different way. That's an interesting conversation you and I will have later. But I think that we should try to have some sort of open dialogue, some sort of understanding. But I think it increasingly strikes me as like text bombing the girl who broke up with you, right? You know, I mean, it's like at a certain point, it's a little bit of a turnoff. You're looking a little bit needy. You look very, very weak. At some point, you have to not cut bait, but you have to back away and reassess and see, where do we go from here? And is there room to negotiate and discuss? I think China's economy has recovered. It's not recovered robustly in the way they would like. I think they have a property meltdown, a stock market, tremendous insecurity in the stock market. People are friend-shoring. China's looking with salivating lips over at Taiwan. We really didn't get into that issue, and I understand there's only so much time in a day, but I don't think that we need to be on bended knee. I don't think we have to be supine, and I think that there is a way to have these negotiations without just saying, baby, 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 please love me, you know? Sorry, I'm from Texas. Yeah, I don't know.
I've been married for 35 years. I don't even, this texting thing with breaking up, it doesn't even intellectually process with me.
So lastly, gentlemen, just under a minute, within a minute, if you've had an opportunity to address, and I'm sure many policymakers may be watching this in the future, and I can guarantee you many of them will. What is your message to the policymakers and even to the White House when it comes to when it comes to the Prime Minister Modi's visit? What if you've had an opportunity to let them know of the most important key aspects of all the factors that you've presented today? We're just curious as to know what that would be. What is your one message to the administration?
Wow. I would say their number one customer is the American people, not international globalist elites. So all nations should be serving the interests of their population first. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good. That's good. It's not compassionate, allowing things to happen for the good of an international perspective. You know, take care of your people. Your people are your customer. For this administration, I think they are more aligned with this international perception. And I know you use the word elite, and that becomes very controversial. But no, there's a lot of truth to that. And each country should be advocating for its own self-interest. There's nothing selfish. In the end, the better good comes from all of that. And I think I don't foresee that with the current administration, but I think that they should always realize that.
I'd say, you know, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? I mean, when they show up, one of the things I hear a lot is the Biden administration wants to talk social issues all day, and India wants to talk economics. Recognize that the economics are in both of our interests, and no one needs a bunch of hectoring on socially trendy issues. I don't care what your opinion on them is, but, you know, well, you know, focus on the mutual areas where we can move forward. I think also the administration would be well served by understanding that the New York Times line is not well received in India, that the BJP, Modi's party, feels beset like they don't have any allies in America. And when they show up, they're not going to want to get lectured at, not even to, and that you have to say, we know what's out there in the press, and yes, the NYT is left of center, and we are a Democratic, you know, administration, but we also hear you on the economy. And I know that at times India doesn't feel that it has a natural ally with the Democratic Party. And I would say try to focus on those things that are in our mutual interest and not lecture them about the environment they're developing, not lecture them about other trendy issues, and just see what we can move forward. And I think the GE deal is a feather in the cap of the administration. And I think that's where we can move forward and just focus on those things.
Well, with that, gentlemen, we'd like to thank you both for coming and just sharing your knowledge with us all. I'm sure many of our audience are extremely grateful for the insights that you have provided today. And I may also say that for the policymakers who may be watching this, this is a very critical moment in the U.S. history, especially with Prime Minister Modi's visit to the U.S. Nobody knows what's going to come out of that exactly. We have an idea. We may have a very good idea of it, but having this insight from both of you, both on the defense and from the economic side, is in a sense a very it's a breath of fresh air for many of us who have been wondering what's going to happen. So thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today, both in person and many of you virtually. And my name is Se Hoon Kim, the senior correspondent for the Global Strat View. Many more to come. And I'd like to also thank our editor and founder, Poonam Sharma, also for just putting this all together with us and to make sure that this U.S.-India strategic partnership is highlighted here in Washington, D.C. So thank you so much, and God bless.